We are now a year into the process with our social housing provider for our social portfolio in South London, and it turns out that a couple of the leases that they've signed, which are 10 and 25-year leases, haven't been registered. For those that don't know, when you set up a leasehold property or you create a lease incumbent on a commercial space, for example, your new tenant will be signing that lease, and if it's over a certain time frame, they will have to register it with HM LR, which is Her Majesty's Land Registry. When do I need to register a lease? And this has arisen because in our social housing portfolio, we have recently been going through registering some leases. We've got commercial tenants that just signed long leases with us. So there's a process that they might need to go through. So for those that don't know, when you set up a leasehold property or you create a lease incumbent on a commercial space, for example, your new tenant will be signing that lease. And if it's over a certain time frame, they will have to register it with HM LR, which is Her Majesty's Land Registry. So just to give the answer away as quickly as possible, it's more than 7 years. So if you are signing up a commercial tenant on a 15-year lease, for example, that is more than 7 years, and therefore that lease should therefore be registered with Land Registry. The reason this has been prevalent this week is that we are now a year into the process with our social housing provider for our social portfolio in South London, and it turns out that a couple of the leases that they've signed, which are 10 and 25-year leases, haven't been registered. They haven't registered their leases like they should be doing. There is an obligation on the lessee to register the lease, and they haven't. And it's causing us a few issues because we are struggling to refinance. This is the final thing now, nailing the coffin to get our refinance over the line. So lastminute.com, solicitor has raised the query around why the tenants' leases have not been registered. So basically, this is the main one, over 7 years. Even if the lease takes effect in the future, i.e. if the lease is for 7+ years, but it takes effect 3+ months after the date is granted, it still needs registering. Any assignment of an unregistered lease means that the lease needs to be registered. And ultimately, it creates a legal interest in the property. For somebody that is leasing the property for over 7 years, the HMLR want to know. They want to know who's going to be in that place for that amount of time period. It provides proof of ownership and priority against other interests. And basically, it makes it easier to sell, assign, or mortgage the lease later. And as I've just mentioned, from a mortgage perspective, it's really holding us up. We use a AP1 form via HMLR, and you'll need the original lease, a plan of the property, and you pay a registration fee based on the lease premium or rent. One of the things that I found interesting is that some leases are still active from 1700s, which is ridiculous.
If you get value from these videos, imagine what we could do for your business with more one-to-one coaching. Now, we've spent over £100,000 on training, business coaching, non-exec directors, and we love sharing that information with our mentees. Click one of the links in the description to find out more. Back to the video.
So yeah, short-term leases under 7 years generally do not need registration. And the other key thing that we have come unstuck with, or not unstuck with, it's for the lessee again to kind of do this process. But ultimately, speaking for our social housing portfolio, we could have registered their lease on their behalf, and we don't need their approval to do so. But with registering a lease, there's also the potential implications of stamp duty. To accompany the lease, you need to submit a SDLT form, and you need the lessee's agreement or approval to submit the SDLT form on their behalf. So we can register the lease on their behalf, but ultimately there's also an SDLT form that needs to be submitted, which you can't do without getting the approval. An SDLT is basically, it takes the rental income over the time frame. So let's say you've got a 10-year lease and it's a 20 grand a year income on that lease. 10 times 20 is £200,000. So effectively £200,000 is less than the £250,000 threshold for residential SDLT. Therefore, it's nil rate. So there is zero SDLT to pay.
I was just going to say an easy way to remember that it's the tenant's responsibility is the way to envisage it is when a lease comes together, it's normally for the tenant's interest. So it's believed that the tenant is the person benefiting from that. They're setting up a new business, opening up a new branch, even though landlord is getting the benefit of recurring income normally. And that is a good way to remember that it is their responsibility.
Nice. And I have a fun fact for SDLT. SDLT has existed in one form or another since 1694, originally to fund war against France.
If you got value from this video, make sure you click the subscribe button down below and ring the notification bell because we release one video at least every week, so you'll be the first to get notified. See you on the next one.